Okay, go back to your agenda. The Oh, it's financial report time. Joyce Times. Are you prepared with your report?
I am. As soon as I had to get reconnected because I can't see up there.
Oh, yeah. Well, we can all be pulling it up on ours.
Yeah. I mean, if you can see up there, that is terrific.
Yeah.
We have attached the minutes from the Audit and Finance Committee because we met about a month ago to go through the proposed budget. So that's attached if anybody would like to open that. But my intent is to go straight into the financials. What I have done a little different than you may have seen previously is I've done an estimate for where I think we're going to be based on financials. Well, this one is an April to April comparison, but the next one, it'll be my estimate for the year. But as if you look at where we are through April year to date, we ended up with renewals higher than projected than we were a year ago. They came in strong the last month. So by that, we ended up through April, $40,000 ahead of where we were in 2021. So nice cushion going into the last couple of months. If you go down to expenses, as we expected, because of headcount changes, our wages are higher. We added 2 positions, and then there was 1 retirement. So we had an overlap of employees for 6 months, but that was planned. So it was no surprise. There is a little bit of tax noise, just the way some taxes got paid. You will note that the board expenses are higher year over year because the prior year you were remote for the whole year. And so far, we had the 1 meeting that was live. So that was the overage for that. Professional fees, basically the same place we were the prior year. For an overage of $257,000, driven by the personnel cost. And so we are less net income because of the personnel expenses. So are there any questions about the year-over-year comparison? If not,
I have a question about equipment lease and maintenance on line 6450. Are we leasing copiers?
yes.
Is that what that is?
Yeah, that is the copier. Okay. We have the one big copier upstairs that is leased, and that is the only lease that we have. All the computers and everything else are owned.
And then the credit card fees, those are the merchant fees that we're having to pay from licensees putting their fees on
Yes,
the card.
we have them and they're offset because we collect them. So we have a revenue at the top. It's also our own fee for using our credit cards, any fees that we incur, because we do occasionally have vendors that when we pay by credit card, they charge us a 3% charge. And that's becoming more and more prevalent, that vendors are starting to do that, the same as we do it, because credit card fees are expensive for people too. So you will note we are actually going back and starting to write for checks because the vendors will accept a check. And it's cheaper to do a check than it is to pay their 3 to 5% adder for the credit cards.
Right.
So, but yes, the credit card fee being up is because the higher number of renewals. Any other questions? The balance sheet is done a comparison of year-end June to where we stand at March. Really, the only asset the company truly has is the cash, and you can see we are up almost $600,000. That is just from the fees coming in, and our cash position continues to improve. We get our majority of our cash comes in November through January with renewals. You will note that we have successfully closed the CDs at North State Bank, and they are deposited into Pinnacle. 2 weeks from now, we will close out the mechanic signatures, and we will roll that into Pinnacle. I am prepaying our insurance. It goes from July to June, and so I don't recognize the whole amount. I'm advertising it over the months. Furniture and equipment. This does not, because I did not do it. David Nall was very helpful in doing a physical inventory for us, and in April wrote off quite a bit of assets that were on the books that we cannot locate. They're old. A lot of them didn't have any value. If I can see the furniture next, when we go to the next meeting, you'll see both the furniture and the accumulated comes down, but we did do a big cleanup in our assets so that when you see the June balance, it will be reflective of exactly where we are. For liabilities, again, the biggest liability that the business has is the accrued vacation payable. When somebody leaves, and Cindy did leave, we paid out the accrued vacation. That's the reason for the decrease from June to now. And then the equity, which is what has been accumulated in the business, has not changed other than the net income. We will be talking about a change to the designation of our equity, but currently the designation for the equity reserves are the same as they were. The increases because of the net income through the year. Any questions about our balance sheet? Next,
We're in great shape.
all right, amazing. very good shape.
Excuse me, just, dated to the city hall.
Oh,
He knows he's already with his cell.
okay, so someone's acknowledged this. Has somebody acknowledged it?
I did,
Okay,
I went out, I told him we call him that way.
perfect. Thank you, Jane. Any questions for the Finance Select Committee or for Joyce? And is there she's got a couple of things, recommendation.
Do you want to look at the comparison of the budget for this year?
Go ahead.
Okay. You see the PT income is higher, PTA income is lower, but year to date through April, we are on plan for the expenses. I mean, for your income. If you get down to expenses, there is some noise in the payroll taxes. My position was done as a contractor, there's no taxes. So there is some noise there and some noise in insurance. Don't have a lot of detail on how the budget was derived for those. So the overage is the overage. I mean, the expenses are not out of line with what we did year over year. But unfortunately, I can't answer the insurance overage to plan because just unfortunately don't have a lot of details. The board is under, the plan was done for you guys to meet live. All 4 meetings did not happen. So we are favorability on the board expenses. Professional fees is driven by legal. Legal is always projected, and you will see when we do this year's budget for any kind of contingency liabilities that may come open or any extraneous legal that has to do other than just the normal monthly. So you will see that our budget is higher than you would think looking at history. IT, there is some depreciation to be done in April as a catch up, but some of the projects just haven't cost as much as we had expected with the plan. Then down with the office expenses, it's timing. The way I've recognized the insurance as opposed to the budget being done, that it was expensed when it was paid. And I have taken more of a accrual based and are doing it over the months. So it will catch up with itself. It's just timing. So you can see for expenses, there is an underlying from insurance cost and the board cost. So we are favorable to the net income by about $45,000. You will see when we have the full year, when we actually did the write-off of the assets, the income variance will decrease, but we are still favorable to the plan, even with the write-off of the assets that we will be doing. Okay. Now, what everybody wants to see is the budget proposal that has come out of the committee meeting. And based on the financial position we're in, to Teresa's point, we're doing really good. The reserves keep getting bigger and bigger because we have had profits every year. So what is being proposed is that for the upcoming year only, not a permanent, but only in the next year, drop the renewal fees from $120 to $100. So you can see when we do that, there is going to be a drop in net income year over year. And what the 21-22 is an estimate of where I think we're going to fall by June of 2022. So this will start using up some of the reserves that we have, the $3 million that is currently in our bank account and in our equity, because the group has done, the organization has done so well. It was voted on by the committee to present you a budget with a drop in the fees and therefore revenue drop year over year. For the expenses, we have a few changes in the personnel. And I say district, it's not, it's deputy director, my mess, but hiring a person in training with to have an overlap. So when personnel changes, retirements happen, we will have somebody in here that is vetted and knows the lay of the land. In addition to which, there is a change to my position being proposed to manage the licensing group. And we go from 20-hour part-time to 30-hour full-time. So that is in here. This budget, I know that the recommendation and what was voted on for Kathy is more than what we put in the budget, but again, it's not a material difference. I will, if this gets voted on, it'll be contingent and I will send out new one with that change in there. The board expenses will be up over what we will be seeing this year because it's budgeted for you guys to meet live 4 times as opposed to 2. Because my estimate for this year has 2 meetings in it. Professional, like I said, there's a thought of adding a part-time research consultant and also upping legal to our normal budget of $100,000 in case there's extraneous matters that have to be done outside of the normal monthly charges. Rent increase, it's built in, there's an increase every year for operating expenses. What else? Oh, credit card fees, just from volume will go up, and we are starting to get away from checks for revivals. We are working on being able to do everything by credit card, so there will be no more checks coming into the office. And then the professional health program, obviously new year over year. Oh, and with this being the full estimate, for the 21-22 year, you can see that we have a bottom line impact of about $34,000 of writing off the assets that we just don't know. And so we got rid of those. So net, we're talking a loss of $400,000 proposal in the 22-23 year, so that one, to use up the reserves. It is Kathy's and my feeling that eventually they're going to start looking that, you know, there's more and more and more cash being generated, and they may start coming and tapping on the shoulder and saying, we want some of it. So for the 1 year, the thought is to give the licensees a break of the $20. And so that's where it's presented. That's the committee went with this option. And like I said, it is a one-time only reduction of the renewal fees. Are there any questions about the budget that we presented? Yeah,
Hearing none, I'll take that.
I do have a question. So for the bonus for the executive director, do we need to have a motion now to put that in the budget?
The motion should be to adopt the proposed budget with the edits from the closed session.
Okay, all right.
For Leslie, would you like to make that?
So moved. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion's been made by Leslie. Do I hear a second? Second. Megan seconded that we adopt the budget as presented before us with the editorial change as noted in our closed session. Any further discussion or questions?
Kathy, do we want to pick this up after your 1 o'clock session?
I think we need to vote
Go
on
ahead
it.
and
Oh, I'm
vote, and
sorry.
then we'll do the policies.
Yeah.
You know, maybe after the closed
Okay,
session.
we'll do a roll call vote since we are broadcasting on YouTube. Please state your name, aye, nay, or abstain. Megan?
Megan Wentz, aye. Jamie Minor, aye.
Paul Marcy, aye. David Edwards, aye.
Teresa Hale, aye.
Rosa Gonzalez, aye.
Leslie Kessler, aye.
Stephanie Bernard, aye. Motion carries with unanimous ayes. Votes. Joyce, thank you for your excellent work and report and for your sticking around to help out with licensures. Shall we take a break, David, and go ahead and invite in our licensee for session?
We can probably turn on the lights.
Yeah.
I have a question. Do I need to continue to live stream during this process?
It's my call. David?
Please come up, seat right over here.
I can make an introduction. We can get you a microphone here. Okay. Mr. Steinbach, thanks for joining us. There's a turn on button there at the bottom.
Hello?
Right there.
Just speak loudly.
Thanks for coming today, Mr. Steinbach. As you know, we're here to address the recommendation of the investigative committee and the board. And what I did earlier before your arrival was I just kind of went over what that recommendation was. I have some background, and I'll let you introduce yourself as well. But just before we get into that, I can just recite, since we're going to be talking exactly about what the recommendation is, I'll just recite that again so it's fresh in everybody's head, since we've discussed a lot of stuff since then. And then I'll just turn it over to you. Our board rules allows for anyone such as yourself to come in and have an informal meeting with the board about these sorts of things. When probationary sentence is recommended by the investigative committee. So I just allow you to speak, and then allow the board members to ask any questions. And then I think what we probably ought to do at the end of this process is the board needs to make a decision about whether the investigative committee recommendation would be adopted or not, and if not, then what modifications may be made to that. So Mr. Steinbach can have an opportunity to think about whether to accept that or not. And then he would be able to have a formal hearing at our next board meeting if he so chooses, or he could enter into a consent order. The options. So the recommendation of the investigative committee would be that the consent order that was entered on February 9th, 2022 would be abandoned. There would be a 36-month period of probation, and during that period, there would be an active suspension imposed for 12 months. Following the period of active suspension, no dry needling for a period of 18 months. After the 18-month period of no dry needling, and before resuming dry needling unsupervised, complete 50 hours of supervised training in dry needling. And there's some requirements that your supervisor must have 5 years clinical practice experience, demonstrate completion of 50 hours of continuing ed of clinical practice in trigger point dry needling, have 2 years clinical experience with trigger point dry needling covering both the upper and lower extremities and appropriate areas of the cervical and lumbar spine. Agree to submit a log of supervised trigger point dry needling showing hours and description to the board on a monthly basis. Agree to be responsible for any dry needling performed during the period of supervised supervision. Then you would also need to successfully complete the probe ethics and boundary violations course and receive an unconditional pass and pay the cost of the investigation. Given that, I'll turn it over to you, just to let you have this conversation. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me here. I appreciate you guys giving me the chance to discuss this with you, kind of give you some context for where I'm coming from. I'm just going to ask some prepared notes. I'm not a public speaker, so I'm just going to do my best here. Okay. So my main purpose for coming here today is to explain the circumstances, apologize, learn from my mistakes, and offer an alternative. I was going to ask, is everybody like really completely aware of the original circumstances of the original consent order? And afterwards, please ask questions about the original consent order and the recent disobeying of that order. Ask as many questions. Yeah, please.
Well, I just have a point of protocol for a moment. I would like for you to just take a deep breath, And let us go around the room and introduce ourselves. You know, we know who you are. We know your history from what the attorney has reported, but you don't know who you're talking to. So I would like to start that if you don't mind. Is that okay, Ben?
Yes.
So I'm Teresa Hale, chairman of this board. I'm a PT and work in Lake Forest.
I'm happy to be the executive director, PT, but non-voting member.
Judy Reagan, deputy director, I'm a PT, non-voting.
Rosa González, I'm a nurse, and I'm the
Public member.
and
Unless I guess I'm a physical therapist from what we think.
I'm Stephanie Bernard, PTA, and I work in Raleigh.
Then I'm Megan Wentz, I'm a PTA, and I am a board member, and I work in Jacksonville. And I'm Jamie Meyer. I met you before. I'm a board member, but because I was on the investigative committee, I abstained on this.
Dr. Palmer, I'm the physician member, I work in Green, North Carolina. Then there was secretary treasurer, PT, and agreeable as well.
Okay, so that's who you're talking to.
Yeah.
So now just start at the beginning.
Okay, from the top. So yeah, I want to apologize, I want to learn from my mistakes, you know. When this first happened, I had a long conversation with my supervisor about, can we turn this awful mistake and harming somebody into one of your biggest strengths? And I thought, you know, after some period of mourning and self-reflection, that's really what I wanted to do. And I want to tell you the steps that I've done to educate myself, prevent something like this from ever happening again. And also just give you some context. You all know me from the worst experiences and decision-making of probably my life, but also I have some testimonials from patients, coworkers, instructors. I think it means more coming from them. One of my clinical instructors I have here is a physical therapist and the acupuncturist who works for the VA, and that's where I got most of my hours learning how to drive needle, apart from my education at High Point University. Okay. Right. So since the original incident, in addition to the mandated dry needling courses and the jurisprudence and documentation courses, I've taken additional steps to prevent future adverse events. I've researched dry needling case studies and case series involving pneumothoraxes and other adverse events. And I've used this information to present an in-service to the entire company I was working for at the time. I did disclosure about what happened with my situation, about things that I've learned how to prevent this from happening in the future. It wasn't just pneumothorax, it was, you know, what happens if like the handle of the needle breaks off while you're working with the patient, and you have like a needle stick situation. And after that, we got needle nose pliers to, you know, remove the needle from the patient in case something like that happened again. I didn't know any of that before. I think it was a nice learning opportunity for the company. And it evolved into a nice discussion about what I did wrong, how can we prevent this from the future, how we move forward, and hopefully they could avoid the same mistakes that I made. I'm trying to be public with this with my peers about what's happened to me as much as I can. Because I don't want anybody to get hurt. That's not why I become a PT. All right. So, for the company, I also created an adverse event analysis in order to maintain good records and accountability after a situation like this occurs. So it was a form that, you know, if an adverse event happens, it would describe the situation. It would go into details regarding how we would rectify the situation, what actions were taken to mitigate this in the future, and what, you know, what emergent steps were necessary, if any. Okay. Additional things that I did on my own, just wanting to be really good at this now. I took my own online dry needling course. It was called From Structure to Function. Sue Falzone, famous PT. She discussed a lot of conservative dry needling methods. It was an online course, not sanctioned by the board, but I figured it was just good to get more education. I read a book I think everybody should read, but I think it was particularly germane to this, a book called Breath by James Nestor. It's regarding cardiopulmonary rehab and philosophy regarding the cardiopulmonary system, how I could use that in my practice. But also with the original person who got the pneumothorax medication. In 3 years, I'm going to contact her. 2.5 years, I'm going to contact her. And I want to give her that book. I care about her well-being, and I think some of the methods in that book, you know, in case someone's had any trauma to their lungs in the past, could benefit from certain techniques. Anyway, I also discussed the incident with physicians and PT contemporaries, just to go over what happened. I'm not trying to get sympathy from these people. I'm trying to say it happened to you. You know, at PT school and breadth education, this is a super rare thing that can happen. Yes, pneumothorax, here are the safety things, safety concerns. But a lot of times, education says it's really rare. Now, I found out since this has happened. I know a lot of people this has happened to. It doesn't get reported, and I think it's a lot more common. So by having these conversations with people, I think it's good for them to hear that it's more common, and it's good for me to put myself out there in a way that, you know, it's part of my punishment, I think, just by telling people what I did. So I brought some folders. I think you guys might have to pass them around, and you know how many people will be here. So, like I said before, I had some testimonials from patients, coworkers, and mentors. Please take a read. I do think I'm a really good physical therapist. Maybe it was a little bit ego, but it doesn't matter what I think, it's what my patients think. And it's just context.
Well, before you do that, I have a question.
Yeah.
So the reason you're here though is because we already had a signed consent order where you had promised to do certain things, right? So what happened? Why?
So yeah. So Justin Leva, my supervisor, he was the my supervisor under the consent order for the needling. It was a couple weeks after I signed. And he works usually Monday to Thursday, sometimes works Fridays. Okay, his schedule is kind of shifts like that. And I work Fridays. He doesn't, usually. And so the morning of the incidents, you know, I was having a tough morning. It was double booked, patients were coming back, and everybody was hurting, worse off the day before, the session before. I'm trying to provide context, I'm not trying to provide excuses. And it was a rough day, and you want your patients to get better. And my wife thinks I have a hero complex. I think it's negative, but this patient came in, we've been working with each other for a while. We've seen some good progress. I talked to him about dry needling. I think for him specifically, it'd be very good to have because he had myofascial trigger points that were referring to concordant pain in his thoracic spine. We had developed trust. I talked to him about needling. He did his own research. He came to me that day, like, David, I had a little bit of a flare. Can you please needle me? I did this research. I really want it. And I should have, I'll be the first to admit I made really poor decision making, and I did it. I try to analyze that moment. I didn't do it to spite the board or my bosses or jeopardize my future. And doesn't matter why I did it. I did it. And during the needling session, everything was fine. Doing up and trap. Patient threw up, maybe it was, meant to be. I had never seen that before. Afterwards, he told me he was holding his breath, and sometimes he does that, and when he gets nervous. And so I sat with him for a little bit, got him some water, he relaxed. He was still starting to feel better, took his blood pressure, took his vitals. He started to feel better, color coming back. We did some light banded exercises just to make sure he was okay. We got his heart rate up a little bit, just some exercises. He was feeling fine. I think he hung around for another 10 minutes. I'm not insisting. And then I felt comfortable that he could go home safe. A couple hours later, I called him and checked in on him. How you doing? He's like, yes, I'm fine. No problem. I feel better. I apologized. He eventually came back to me as a patient. One of his testimonials is in here, unsolicited by me after this incident. So talked to the front desk person. It was just me and her in the clinic. Somebody threw up. I know I wasn't supposed to be needling, but I reached out to my supervisor, like my regional supervisor, since my local one was not there that day. And I reached out to the local supervisor. We all got together a powwow, went all the way up to the president of the company. And we all talked and decided that it was best to self-report. And I wrote a letter to Kathy at that point, describing the instances of that day. I think it was the same day. And yeah, so I think that provides some context to that day. I don't really want to go into like what was going through my head at that moment. It was, and I'm sorry. So
when you woke up that morning and you're getting a shower, you're putting on your clothes, getting ready to go to work, you know it's Friday.
Yeah.
You know that your supervisor is not going to be in the clinic that day. The next thing that goes through your head is, oh yeah, man, he's not going to be there. I can't dry needle anybody I see today, because that is in violation of the consent order I agreed to.
I agree.
I want to know where that moment was. What happened there?
You're right. I mean, something like that needed to happen in my head. It did. I think some of the stress from the day and the request superseded logic. And I've tried to go over this a lot. Like, as you can imagine, I've been ruminating over those exact moments. I risked so much for, then there's so many other things I could have done that I've had success with him.
Do you think that you were somewhat embarrassed to tell him? Did he know that you needed to be supervised while needling? Do you know that?
No, the way we did it, just to keep patient clinician trust, is that, hey, Justin, let me show you the technique on this patient. That's how we did it.
Okay. So you were never like upfront, with the patient saying, what happened Friday and kind of that.
I like all your opinions on this. I don't know if I was a patient getting that kind of treatment, if a clinician said that to me, if I would do it, even if it was for beneficial. I don't know. I mean, perhaps I should have. We had talked about that, and that was kind of the plan from the supervisor.
When, in other instances, when you did dry needle, and did you discuss that with your supervisor that you plan to dry needle? Or were there times when supervisor was just in the clinic and you dry needle, then that was your level of supervision?
No, he was at the table the whole time. And like I'm not sure how many of you all are in the outpatient setting, but you could plan for anything in an outpatient setting. Once the patient comes to the door, everything changes. So it's not like I have a 2 o'clock on my needle. It's a very small clinic, only 2 clinicians, 4 tables, and we were right there. So what would happen, I would go to Justin and say, hey, in like 10 minutes, I'm gonna need it, can you hang out with us? And so that's how it worked. He made time for it.
Did you have any other instances where you did dry needling on Friday or any other day when he wasn't there?
I have a question about the first patient. Did he require a chest tube?
No procedures, just monitoring. The small apical in the thorax, right-sided. No, yeah, just monitoring, just short breath, and breathing or antibiotic afterwards. That's the caution. Keeping it out.
So from what I gathered, the patient wanted this request. But I guess I'm just going to be there. I'm doing a public exam on a patient. Back check. Just that's what you do. Because it doesn't matter. And unless it's urgent, unless the patient is coding, but the patient wasn't coding, right? I mean, they weren't having any issues that were causing them to be have that procedure.
It's a dry needling.
Yes.
It's not an emergent procedure at all. No, those stakes usually are not as high for my world. First, you're talking about the first one or the second?
For both. And I'm just saying, as a practitioner, when you know that your procedure has to require assistance in pathology or staff, something just, unless it's emergent, that's rare where a patient crashes on you. Can't wait for a chaperone. Just gotta make sure this was an effective procedure. But your situation is kind of different because you were consent.
Yeah, I agree. In the first situation, I did supervision.
The second,
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I agree. The second one I did totally. And like I said before, there could have been other interventions that would have been just as. It could have been effective.
did you call your supervisor? Prior to doing the procedure?
And I'm not coming here saying what I did was right. I'm coming here saying what I did is wrong.
So I'm gonna be devil's advocate. So let's say you did this patient with the thorax, and it was one that caused a right shift in the heart, X-ray. How would you deal with
At that point, it doesn't matter what my future is for the patient.
that? Well, no, but it does matter. I want to know what would you do? Oh, patient crashed. I mean, depending on how big the needle is, but the pneumothorax, that's what I always ask. Require a chest tube. I'm asking you. I mean, you took it upon yourself. You made a decision. Your decision. And you did this, and I'm asking you. And they're thinking, what nothing happens? Okay, seriously, what would happen if the patient did have a significant pneumothorax? And my question to you is, what would be done? And I'm not hearing an answer.
What I was getting to was that it doesn't matter about my feeling that way. It's all about what the patient's going through. It's an emergency situation. You have to alert emergency services. So, based off their symptoms, if I was suspicious of a pneumothorax, let's talk about some subjective symptoms. Sorts of
How would you assess
you're having a shortness of breath, chest tightness, like anybody's sitting in the chest, severe pain, vitals for sure, like input oxygen levels, and if that plus the needling technique was enough evidence to suggest that a pneumo happened, absolutely immersion.
And I bring this up because I know when I was in residency with thorough procedures, tap the bottom there, and it's fluid. And the risk is, and we tell the patient, we may be bringing, we may be doing two things on it. Thoracocentesis and second, maybe doing chest tube because it's the way it is. And so my question, that's what I was asking. I'm not trying to be living. I want to know if you know that because normally you look for the shifting of the trachea, you take it, your stethoscope and make sure there's absent breath sounds. So those are things that if I'm doing dry needling or that's the risk, I'm going to when I'm more physical therapy, I'm going to make sure, or nurse, I'm going to make sure I know how to deal with that, especially if I had that incident before. Normally, when I would teach residents and residents, one of the things I would tell them is the most dangerous position is the one who doesn't know they know.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so you got to learn from that situation. So I'm just surprised that we had that situation. We actually had it, and granted it was minor. One that required it. That's just something I don't know. As a clinician, you hope you would take that back.
Right.
I mean, I know in medicine there's an adverse outcome. We have what's called an M&M conference, and we all sit back and look at it, and a lot of times you couldn't have done anything different. Right. But this is different. You made a conscious decision to do this, and that's I'm just trying to get the reasoning on. Since this wasn't an urgent issue, what steps can you have for yourself on the threshold of way behind it? Most people, they get sued. They don't get sued necessarily for the end using the court judgment. They don't do their job. They don't check all the different areas to make sure that
A lot of really important stuff. First, I'll address the training that I got around dry needling. Getting a stethoscope and checking if the lungs sounds. It seems like an obvious thing, I think, for a physician. It never came up in any of the conversations about needling safety. I think perhaps the subjective signs and symptoms were enough for somebody like me to be like, okay, that's enough signs and symptoms to err on the side of caution for emergency services.
And who did you get your training through?
So like everything or
Dry needling training.
yeah, so High Point University through Alexander Roman, acupuncturist and PT. My pain seminars went to Vancouver, and then also structural function super. So it's a certain training class.
I could not hear that.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I'll start from the top. So High Point University.
That's where you were a DPT
Yeah.
student, okay?
They emphasized dry needling, and there was a future of PT with good instructors there for dry needling. And then it was Alexander Roman. He goes by Jude. He's my clinical instructor. I spent 12 weeks, 35 hours a week, and the main intervention that he uses dry needling and acupuncture as well.
So you watched him and he allowed you to do some
Of
dry
course,
needling?
yes.
Okay.
I have that as well. And primarily it was fine.
I'm sorry,
Primarily had spinal patients,
fine.
back pain. And then my pain seminars 1 and 2, trigger point dry needling, and then the online course I took for conservative dry needling with seatbelt zones called structural function.
My pain seminars were those post-graduation.
Yeah, that was part of the consent order.
That was part of the consent. So you completed both of those as part of the consent.
Yeah. Prior.
And that was before the second encounter.
So I also think that deviated trachea and listening for breath sounds should be part of that adverse event protocol. I will bring it up to them. It wasn't part of the training, and clearly it should be. But my best answer I can give to that is, I think the subjective signs and symptoms would have been enough to.
my point was, I wasn't trying to give a lecture on what I was trying to say. if this happened to me, that I'm gonna go back, you may not, there's certain pathology that's associated with what's called spontaneous disorders, where you don't put it, some patients who get that, you got to see. Actually, they have to learn. Yeah. So my point was, I'm hoping, praying that you go back.
Yeah.
And learn from this. It's what I was trying to have to do your own thing. That's what the patient.
I think that's really important, and I really have tried to do that. I think the learning points never spoke to that particular method that you were talking about. But I really went through a bunch of cases, and I tried to find where people went wrong, why they went wrong, and avoid these. I have a presentation that I made about it with my research and readings. It's the upper trap muscle is like the most common place for a pneumothorax, for example. There's areas you have to be particularly careful and use different methods. So they don't have to even pierce the thorax to get a pneumothorax. You just touch it with the needle. Most likely the smaller ones. So I want to learn from this too. I really do. I think the patient that has mimesis after the needling, so the sympathetic fight or flight reaction, kind of holding breath. A lot of my coworkers, colleagues, after the fact agree. I also brought this up the chain real fast, so like my coworkers, as things have happened, I didn't want to be the only person to make a decision.
To your point of being in a physical therapy clinic, outpatient, very busy, 2 patients an hour, all of that. I'm a physical therapist assistant and I was in an outpatient setting, so I understand the hustle and bustle of what's happening. I also have 2 PTs that do dry needle and have spent numerous hours of training to do that, including training on me to make sure that, the feeling was right and the objective was met and all that stuff. And I totally understand the fact that with the dry needling, you can relieve that muscle very quickly. So it's easy to do, in a quick fix. You're like, okay, everybody's in pain. I'm going to try this and hopefully it releases it. Somebody's happy. They go home. It's all good. My thing would be my coworkers spend so much time making sure that they don't do that. And doing that the first time, you learn from it, you come back and you do the training and all that. But at the same time, you have to be the one that knows to say, I'm not supposed to do this yet. And it's our job to make sure that the people that are being treated are treated fairly and have trust in the people that are treating them. So I almost would think, regardless of what happens, that you go forward and you tell your patients, hey, this has happened to me before. This is why I'm doing it. I would almost full disclosure, because you are going to have to build that trust back up.
I don't know if I'll ever trade you. I'm kind of talking about that. Yeah, it can be very effective, very quickly.
But it also needs a lot of practice.
Yeah. I've been needled everywhere. They also want experience of, I want to know how it feels, not just doing it. Yeah, you bring up good points. I don't have. I can't change the past about what I did.
Do you agree with the recommendation? The vote recommendation?
I have a slight change. I agree that you have responsibility for the safety of the public. And I kind of think that's my responsibility also, for people's quality of life in the public. So I'll just get to the point. Like with that said, I would propose a slight alteration to it. I'm unemployed. I after the email about the recommendation, my employer let me go, and just give me a lot of time to think about what I could do to make up for some of these things. And I agree. I think a probe ethics boundary course at my cost and pass it flying colors is really important. Pay for the cost of the investigation meeting. 48 months of going dry needling instead of 36, after which 100 hours supervised instead of 50. Also take a McKenzie 1 CEU course, which some of you may know, it's a very non-invasive, really going to touch the patient for most cases, ways of treating back pain. You know, it's an alternative to using dry needling. It's very effective. These are just recommendations. Honestly, you could give me a lifetime ban of dry needling, and I'd be happy. The 1 year of active suspension is really what it's the hardest, obviously. I'm just trying to provide my family, and I trying to do what's best for my patients. I feel like I have helped a lot of people. I'm not trying to convince everybody that what I do is right, that I made some awful decisions. I'm just trying to temper and functional. And any recommendations that you want to add on top of what I asked for, that's fine. Just the 1 year active suspension. It's really what I'm asking for some needs. So, and I understand you guys have to protect the public. If that's not what you guys choose, there's no hard feelings. Like, you guys have a tough role, and I put you guys in a tough position. It's an important position you guys have to be in. So I respect whatever you guys decide. I can answer more questions if you need more context about my background or anything at all. Again, the gist of it. I think the disciplinary committee was, forced by my actions. I had no ill will towards you or anybody else for making these decisions. Just want to put that on the record. I appreciate you all.
Thank you, David. Anybody else have a question for David? Dan?
So you as the board can discuss what you heard and then make a decision now as to whether you want to accept the recommendation of the investigative committee. We're in an open meeting, so everybody has the opportunity to hear what that discussion is. But you don't have to make that decision. The problem we face is we have a long time between now and the next board meeting. We have only 2 weeks. You just bring it up again. We've got a delay. So seeing them be more efficient to come up with an agreement today. But if you can, it's not a problem. Think about it or discuss what you want. It's up to discretion.
I think we'll probably excuse you, David, and have some discussion and vote before we leave today. But we have a lot of other business on our agenda.
Okay.
Yes.
I just need a point of clarification. So your request is that we reconsider the length of time for the active suspension.
And add as much else as you want. I think that's my request. I have some suggestions, but it's up to you if you decide to do it all.
Thank you, David.
Thank you so much.
Thought holders.
Okay. Yeah. So this is like for multiple people. It's all in on one. So you have to pass it around. You want multiple?
Yeah.
I didn't do it. I try to do overkill.
Okay. Didn't help myself much at all, but now we're gonna have a discussion. We're gonna come to a consensus and make a decision and have a vote.
One of the things that stood out the most is the hero time place thing, which is like, okay, Is this something that occurs all the time? And is that a middle issue that is going to play in the future? Not entirely convinced necessary, honestly.
And with Leslie's question, when you asked him if he had done it before, you know, on any other Fridays when he wasn't there. That didn't sound good. Supervision seemed vague. Like when they were supervising, they have 4 tables, so is he actually right there, or is he? What would be the other alternative for like 12? Right now it's 12-month suspension, so could it really modify that for less, right? Like 8 months, 6 months, I mean, you can do whatever.
Any of that is on that.
Well, the thing is that he has family to eat. And I know that there was a big mistake. And I agree with you. I don't think that he was very honest when he says that he didn't do it before. We don't know that. But what I think is that this was really a learning experience. And after being here for all the stress that he's been through, I would think that he's gonna think it twice before he would do it again without knowing what. So for that one, I wouldn't mind to give him any, like, the probation and whatever it takes for it, but let it work so he can get the money to feed his family.
He's got 12 months active
These
suspension,
are tough times.
3 years of suspension. He actually wanted 4 years.
You just want it without Friday. So it's the year of no working, and then 36 months of supervision of drumming, right? Or working period.
The board will require that we not extend that beyond 3 years. So that we maxed out on probation.
I thought it was interesting that he said it would be okay with him if he never dry needles again.
That's learning it.
Maybe that's just a to accommodate your idea of reducing the active, but also stating never dry needle again. Yeah, that's not, I mean, if that's relevant, reasonable.
Can we restrict his future practice forever?
Place reasonable restriction on licenses.
My question is gonna be, is he actually gonna stop? I mean, I don't know. I just don't.
It's only an issue if it gets coming.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Well, I really and honestly think that he's gonna think twice before doing it. I mean, and if 36 months probation, if he has to come here twice, it's not gonna be as merciful as if we are going to give him an opportunity. I mean, if you see him here a second time, I'm sure that nobody will believe that he needs that he deserves a second.
This is the second time.
It's a time.
Is there any,
He's already
the
been
issue
through
is,
the
the issue is he blew off the consent order, the initial consent order, so that's one. He's already been once. This is his second time for the consent order for the first. So, I don't know.
It's not taking.
Perhaps, is this within our purview to say, okay, yes, you can work with them a year, but you can't work in an outpatient setting?
Sure.
Because I don't know, I mean, in other settings you do, is dry needling happening very often?
He could open up his, I mean, he could open up his own place if he wanted to, right? Like, I think that there needs to be some type of restriction on his dry needling, which he won't have an issue with.
But that would be an outpatient practice. I'm saying like if you were in, I mean, in home care, are they doing dry needling routinely? I mean, you know, I mean, in our hospital setting, they're not. You know, in the inpatient rehab setting, they're not. I don't know.
It's less
I don't know
common,
in the skilled nursing facilities.
It's less
you know, that
common,
kind of
but-
thing. So are
but
there,
you couldn't put past it, like,
so I was just thinking that it's important for them to, you know,
I don't want
keep him from working, because ultimately, I mean, let's be honest, what could you really do to hurt someone other than things with needles and extraneous modalities? But at the same point, is he in the position where he would not do something because it might hurt someone? I don't know. You know what I mean?
I would say his problem solving skills are not, not very impressive to me, so I wouldn't go as far as to say that there's nothing else that he can do that could hurt somebody.
His arrogance.
Yeah.
So
Those are-
I was just trying to think, how to think about a setting where it's easy to make that decision. Oh, I'm doing the, you know, the ankle now, so you can't get a pneumothorax from an ankle, so let's, you know.
I get what you're saying.
There was a
Yeah.
storyline where this paramedic was giving patients medication to stop their heart so that he could be the hero and restart the heart. And he went from state to state and it finally caught up with him in the storyline, which is a TV thing. But he did it because he needed that attention from childhood. Apparently, he was like, you know, the wallflower, whatever. But he found as a child, he saved somebody's life. So he took that with him, with that hero complex. So this concerns me that is he really that sorry? And is he really going to be critical?
He made the conscious choice to do it. Right, that's my biggest.
Both issues came around dry needling, so do we take that out of the equation? Do we say no more dry needling, and then should we modify what we're asking of it? And then,
Dr. Garcia, did you have medicine, did you study medicine in the United States? I didn't, I studied medicine in Mexico, and when I see the training the people have here in nursing and medicine, I see it's a lot of good technology, and it's an excellent reading books, but it's not that much practice. And I think maybe that's why many people fail on practice settings, because they don't allow you to put your, like people that is to do a vaginal exploration. They have to have a consent from the family members. So I don't want to extend, but I think sometimes it's part of the system that they don't allow the students to have enough practice.
and just to clarify, he went to school, graduated, but he didn't take any other courses after that. The only thing that he took was the 12 weeks of clinical. So that's what sets me off too a little bit. Like, you should have done multiple in-person things before even touching needles.
I mean, you have to.
Like 12 weeks with just supervision is not gonna cut it. I don't like.
It is what that was probably my point.
Yeah.
That it's not enough that you read the book. You need to practice, you need to eat it.
But
It's not the same.
Yeah, and I
As
think,
you touch the skin and you see
Yeah.
the thickness of the texture.
but he should know that.
He should have
He should know
gone
that,
for that.
hey, I might not know everything that I need to know right now with a kneeling, wherever. Like, he should have had the critical thinking and just to not do it.
Right.
David, I have a
So-
question about time. So he hasn't been working since he was terminated from his last job, even though the suspension is not in effect yet because the consent order is not there.
That's right, we're still operating on the old consent.
He just hasn't done it.
So the clock starts ticking once the consent order. So how long ago has it been that he was?
February 22nd was the date of the first consent.
If he could still get a job right now, he just couldn't dry needle. If he could still be working,
But
he just can't dry needle.
there's a disciplinary action already in his file. So that's going on him a little bit,
Yeah.
probably prevent it from getting certain
But
jobs.
just, right, I'm just thinking, so, okay, if he's already, so since
3 months ago.
How long has he not been working?
3 months and a half.
No,
After the second
Second
time.
or it's different?
the email about the second incident came in sometime in early to mid-March. And so then we had to figure out what we were gonna do, and when we let him know in late April, mid to late April, that's when he started. So it's been about a month.
All right. I was just saying, just, say, okay, 12 months, sort of like, what do they call it, time served or whatever, like that. I was just saying, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we'll give you a break. It's gonna be a year, but, you know, we'll say 9 months. Once the consent signed.
I say we say 6 months.
And no outpatient.
Or no needling
in any-
for X amount of time, like maybe
Well,
if
that
he can't needle and if he takes for, let's say, a year, he can't dry needle for 12 months, he could take that year and do the required training. And then you could, and then
I
you can
think
still
that's
be
what's gonna
But he's
hit him,
already
just
done
the
the
6
months,
months. I think the 6 months is what's gonna hit him, because he
Well-
wants to work. He doesn't care to dry needle anymore.
I don't know, I think.
Okay, he said that last time, and this is what happened. Just saying.
Yeah.
Oh, he did
Well, he
say-
also said that the patient asked for it, which, from what you said, he had to coerce
Right.
the
yeah,
patient
talk
into
patient.
it. Or from what
Well,
was.
I don't know that I said
recalled.
that. I read you what he said.
Right, right.
So,
From what was recalled, it was like a coercion and.
yeah, patient, bad me talking. I'm asking. The patient apparently went home and did some research on home. And okay, so now that you've heard his story, I feel like I can say more about what I think. Well, I do think he is remorseful for what happened, and you heard him say that it didn't cross his mind to think about, oh, I have a consent order in place, my supervisor is not here, I'm not gonna do that. And I mean, physical therapy is about a lot of judgment calls, and if you're gonna use an invasive procedure, you need to be making good judgments. And to Dr. Garcia's point, you need to understand what you're going to do, or recognize that there are emergency situations that can happen. I felt like what he said today wasn't fully representative of what happened the first time. She ended up in the hospital. She also had to miss a trip out of the country because she couldn't fly because she had a pneumothorax. No, there were a lot more consequences to this than I think maybe he may even knew. You know, we happen to know that we received the actual written complaint from the patient. But I'm not sure that there was the follow-up even after the patient left, that there could have been.
So she was symptomatic.
I think so.
Yeah. she had-
I'm not sure that how much she said to him either. So that's the other.
But he doesn't
job.
know whether she required chest.
Yeah, in the end, I don't think she did, but she did have to go to the hospital.
So she probably had to do 2-3 days. They're on that to make sure that she pulse off, make sure. But she was symptomatic. She had to be in the hospital.
Yeah, and he did talk to her after she didn't need chest.
Okay.
So he wasn't involved in the monitoring, but she went to the hospital.
But she had to be in the hospital.
I just wanted him to say, yes, I know that, like, I just wanted him to say something different. Because it just sounded like he was like, yes, I made a mistake, now I should, everything should be squashed, because I said, I'm sorry.
And
that's-
whatever
that's-
it is, apparently he said. well,
Right, so.
Well,
I
he
just-
said that he was considering not doing dry needling because in the moment, this does feel bad. You know, you not done good, well by yourself or your patient or the clinic that you work for, and you are feeling badly. And I'm still struggling to think that he really understands what his choices, his judgments, and what he's really doing. You know, some of the things that he said today, that you can't plan for this. We most certainly can plan for this. You most certainly can plan for
And you
this.
can say, no, you could have done manual, you could have done exercise, you could have done so many other things.
And that's
Right.
the other thing is dry needling has become ubiquitous. And unfortunately, when we're teaching entry level, pre-entry level to the profession, individuals how to do this, you don't have the practice context to be able to say, I need to use every tool in my toolbox before I'm going to choose to use something that's invasive. And that's my struggle with this. I'm not a dry needler, so maybe I would have chosen differently. I'm not a dry needler, but I did work in an outpatient setting. And so that also is a little bit bothersome. Pneumothoraces are serious. I don't care whether they happen more often than we know about. We don't want them to happen at all.
So can we permanently just revoke this dry needling abilities? I mean, do you feel like that is too much, too excessive? Or do you think that that's reasonable and appropriate?
I don't know that I would say that we would want to do that. I personally don't know that I would make that recommendation.
The recommendation of 36 months of probation.
Yeah, and that's really,
And
really
what about-
serious.
And what about 6 months as Dr. Garcia says, of no working except instead of 1 year?
I think it's because I've been through this whole thing and been the recipient of many conversations with him where I don't feel like he understands. That concerns me. Is 6 months long enough? I don't know, and I don't know if it's time alone that's really what helps you. I think that probe course that we started to send people to more often, which is ethics and boundary violations, that is staffed by either and both, maybe a licensed psychologist, a social worker, and an MD, and they evaluate you after you've completed this 2-day-long seminar. You have to write an essay about why you did what you did, which was he was very uncomfortable talking about today. That's to me the issue.
Yeah.
And if you have to make judgments and you're making judgments all day long about what you do in this profession, I feel like that's where we have to get. Or what you want to try to achieve if you're going to help somebody remediate. That's really the issue. It's not the punishment necessarily of length of time. I just would like to hope that we could help him get past this as a new grad.
I agree. I mean, I have concerns about his decision making. It feels like that he was determined that he was going to be dry needling on this patient, and he had to persuade this patient to agree. And he's afraid that he's going to change his mind if he didn't do it right then. So if the patient really wanted it, he recognized it. And it was dry needling. But it could have easily been another procedure.
Right, and if he was double booked, he said he was busy, why even go that route? If you don't know this, you've been going back and forth with this guy about dry needling, you should probably just see him one-on-one if you can, to make him feel more comfortable.
And to Stephanie's point, if we eliminate dry needling, then he could still say, oh, well, I could just do an ankle or calf. That's not going to cause an adverse reaction there. So, I've been on the investigative committee, and I know the depth of research that the PI does for us, the depth of medical records review that the committee has looked at, having him come in and informally testify to the committee. He agreed to that consent order before he blew it. My opinion is to accept the recommendation of the investigative committee.
I think the only thing that's gonna help them learn from it is the time off, because that's what they're asking for it to be taken away, is that time off. That's what's going to hit and say, hey, this is serious.
Yeah.
Like, you can't do this with people. They have to trust you, and that's huge.
And I thought you made a great point about being completely upfront with people.
Right, so that's what I was trying to get out of him, like,
I
why
mean, I
didn't
really
you
think
not
you
say
should tell his patients, hey, I'm on probation for 3 years to learn how to do this better. This is why we're gonna try other things today. Like, I feel like full disclosure is important because they are putting everything into you and respecting you and trying to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And if they don't have any idea whether it's the supervisor agreement or whatever,
I mean, I would personally tell my patients, I would say, hey, this is what's going on. Like, it's a personal relationship, honestly.
Or I think you would benefit from dry needle when Justin gets back. I'm gonna ask him to
Right.
work, treat you.
Yeah.
So very uncomfortable.
Okay. Are we ready for a motion and a vote? I'm gonna move that we accept the recommendation as written from the investigative committee.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion or question? We're gonna do a roll call vote. All those in favor of the motion, say your name and aye. If you're opposed, say your name and no. If you're abstaining or recusing yourself, say that as well. Megan?
Living once, I. Jamie Minor, recused.
David Edwards, aye.
Teresa Hale, aye.
Rosa Gonzalez, I abstain.
That's an answer.
And ayes have it. David, you already written the consent, the new consent order.
No, I've got a letter to him laying out what his options are. So now that I know what I'm going to do, I'll present that to him. And he may request a formal hearing. So I'll just have to let the board know. He may sign. So, we'll see. But now that I know your position, we can just move to the next step. It'll be finalized when we have a hearing. Similar stuff.
And that would happen our next board meeting. If
Yes.
you did decide to get a.
Yes, if he asks for a consent order, though, given that you've already accepted that, we can get that done before September. But if he does want a formal hearing, he has to be done in September.
He has the right to come back.
Yes.
It stretches out the time.
Yeah,
He's
he's,
looking at
he's
2
not,
years then.
but he's still not working. He still can't work.
Right.
Okay.
On the way up, he and I did have a conversation, but not that he will hold to this after he thinks about it, but he said he really felt like the recommendation of the investigative committee wasn't something like losing your license that he would need to hire an attorney for. So he felt like right now in this moment that he would probably accept it and sign it. He didn't necessarily think he was going to go through a contested.
So if that's the case, then it can be done quick. Because we don't have to, since you've already approved it, well, we don't have to come back and approve it again. I can just get a signature next to it.
And just for your information, what he gave me in this file are just on an attestation of his wonderfulness as a physical therapist from the receptionist who he works with, the instructor of lidocaine seminars, 1 and 2, demonstrated clinical competence. This is the PT and acupuncturist who was his clinical instructor for the 12 weeks. This is a colleague. These are his APTA clinical performance scores from clinical instructors while he was at PT school. And the final one are online reviews for their practice, that he was a good physical therapist. So none of this documentation really has any impact on the decision making that we have just discussed. I think he gave all that to you, but the investigator. Okay, so back to the agenda. David wanted to leave off 3. So. got an hour.
That's your goal.
It would be nice to get it right.
Yeah, I bet. He was Joyce. Finish put those on here. Did you finish? Did you finish your financials?
I wish.
Okay.
And there's the rest I will go as fast as I can. Use of reserves, what this is, per what I am learning, I'm learning a lot that is different from the corporate world. You saw in the financials, the pieces of the reserves that were spec'd out for certain things. And what that does is say, if the state taps us on the shoulder and says, we want part of your money back, if we designated it for specific things, they can't touch it. Now, what I've shown you at the June 21st is not what was booked in the ledger, but this is how the audited financials were presented that were done. And Kathy and I have worked on how we would like it to be presented at the end of June when we go through our audit, to have a reserve for payroll so that the state can't take money that we can't get paid. A reserve for continuing education, which was there. Information technology, if we have to throw everything away and start over at 300,000, which was the same. Replacement of property and equipment, that would pretty much replace everything that we have. Potential move, the reason we put that is this building is being sold. Nothing should happen to the lease. I mean, we were, and Teresa, I've got something I gotta have you sign related to that. But in case we decide we want to break our lease and move elsewhere, we want to put the reserve. Put a reserve for unanticipated investigations and unanticipated litigations. So this is how we would like the year-end financials when we do the audit to be presented, so that at least there's 2.3 million that the state could not come and take if they decide they want to tap into our excess. There's still, you know, whatever net income, $200,000-$300,000, that will go up. I've just left it consistent with where it was at June 21. So there will be close to $1 million out there that's undesignated if the state decided to come and tap and want reserves. But, you know, at 2.3, I mean, we've got room to operate and be fine. Recognizing that another year down the road, we're talking about a $400,000 loss, which will eat into this. It will go against the undesignated, but that'll be at the end of 23. So we will be tapping into the excess with next year's projected budgeted loss.
I guess as a small business owner, I'm both amazed and excited that we have these kinds of reserves. But I also like to understand rules. So if undesignated money is subject to a grab back,
And I, Kathy'd have to speak to if that's ever been
I mean,
done.
we talk about that, but that's never happened. It's just that my understanding is that the designated monies are not really available because they're for a designated purpose.
so I'm assuming that we have designated every possible dollar in every possible category. So that it
And
is,
I think honestly, the state, if I did anything else, I mean, could I? I mean, payroll reserve, we could take to $500,000, which would cover you for 2 years. I mean, we could do that. It's all subjective. This is the first time I have worked with a quasi-government to know exactly what they would do. I mean, we could, the only thing I would really feel comfortable would be to take the payroll reserve up so it would cover us for 2 years. The rest, you know, like I said, we would have to throw every piece of equipment away to do this. We would have to, David and I would be very happy if I said, here's $300,000 budget, do whatever you want from an IT perspective.
I heard you say,
So, and by having the litigation and the investigation, about the only place we could do anything else would take the payroll to a 2 year. Yes.
Running back to this virtual PT thing, Could we potentially see legal costs down the road if that became like a class action lawsuit? Should we designate money under unexpected legal?
I've got $1 million. But we could do more. I don't know.
That would be a question for David. We would end up in a situation like that.
And what happens if you designate funds and then you don't use them?
What's
Is that
the
every
action
street?
now?
Is that every street nice?
Well, you know, it is out there, and I mean, this is always in our audit. It's always public information, and so, you know, whoever reviews these audits, which I know is the comptroller's office, they see it. You know, I think at this point, there have been a number of boards that were being consolidated or attempted made to be consolidated. We haven't talked about that in a long time, because we're not one of them. Because partially because they don't have the money to really sustain a small board or small licensee population. We are probably not on the list because we do have, you know, sufficient financial resources. The question is, you know, whether the state would ever come to do that. We live in a state where that hasn't happened, and we don't know whether it would.
Well, and in today's financial housing market, you can put another 250 in that possible future building acquisition. Now, the 750 isn't gonna buy it.
But for a 10 staff, we would never, to me, the reason I suggest that go away, with a staff of 10 and right now only 5 are in the office at any given time, it would be physically irresponsible to build your own place.
So that has a long history that predates me, but I think buying a building that would then have multiple tenants in it was the original idea.
Maybe.
And we're just not going to do that in the very foreseeable future. Talk about the 2020 to 2026, well, that's not, you know, we can't even see that. Yes, so it's not in there anymore. Now, you may still want to put something in there, and I don't have any arguments about doing that. But it's probably not for a building acquisition. It has more to do with are we going to move or have different kinds of office space?
So let's say we go into a massive recession, people get paid their licensure renewals. We could potentially have a line for the operations, utilities, more in the payroll. And just like with APT and C, when COVID pretty much almost destroyed it, because APTA said you don't have to pay your dues now, and they really struggle. And so that might be possible, you know, extra to designate some for overhead and operations, give them something like that.
And have we approved the reduction in licensure fees?
Yes.
We approved that at our last board meeting.
Yes, and then you reaffirmed that today by approving my budget. That's Yeah, no, I was gonna say, you know, if you would like some different categorization, this is a proposal. It's not final until you say it is, and we can adjust it, have an operations category instead, and maybe increase the litigation some, and, you know, move things around a little bit. We can do that, we can bring that back.
It would all be like, okay, let's say we could collect renewals for a year. What does it cost to keep the lights on, you know, pay our fees, you know, our cost in addition to the salaries, and maybe about the salaries up a little bit as well. That way, I think that's justified for it, would be scrutinized.
So why don't we play around a little more and we'll bring that back. So we won't vote on that today. It's fine. Great. So I'll do policies next. Okay. Sorry, just lost my place.
We did talk about some policy. Since I've come in, we're working on formalizing some of our policies. Maybe let's do the travel. Like I told Kathy, I kind of went on the internet and borrowed some of the best of travel policies to go through. But the highlights of this, so you don't have to read it all, is time framing, telling both the board and our staff that there's 30 days from an event to turn in an expense report. That's just one, so we have questions to ask that it makes it easier. It's a shorter time frame.
It helps keep your financials on more timely and accurate.
Exactly. Basically, we are going to distribute this, and it just says that the employee or the board, when they sign it and give me the voucher or the expense report, they're vouching that they are legitimate expenses. We did, from those that were in the committee meeting, we've added some information around personal vehicle mileage. We do adopt the IRS rules. That's when they went up to 58 cents. I totally expect next year that the reimbursement will go up yet again. But we've defined for the staff the conditions of when we will pay mileage. And like I said, this is probably not much different than you guys have operated under. We're just putting definitions around what we expect with accommodations, air travel, personal meals we have. And we have stipulated maximums on breakfast, lunch, and dinner and total day meals based on what the state and the national government do. And we went higher than that. Any of these, these are rules. If there's extenuating circumstance, you're at a place that you couldn't eat for what we defined in here at $75 a day, then either the board director or the executive director can sign off if you go outside of the policy, but to the point it can be pre-approved. That is what we would like. And then to what the committee has not seen for hotel stays, we put some definitions around what time meetings start, how far you have to travel for hotel stays. And also for the staff, the last, and this was not part of the original that the committee saw, but we have defined things that will no longer be reimbursed. They may have been reimbursed in the prior years, but we have no longer personal phones unless a phone is issued by the board. It won't be reimbursed. Internet for remote employees will not be reimbursed other than extenuating circumstances. And so that is just defining what kind of we won't do. And like I said, once these are all approved, we will be sending them out to the board and the staff with the changes tonight. I mean, the board's really good about getting the expense reports really fast. It's really good. And that's what we're trying to
Present
Trying to
company
do.
excluded, right?
do. What?
Present company excluded.
I said, you guys are great.
I think she's talking about me.
Nope, that would not be the one that I had to pay 6 months late.
So no need for a massage.
I know, are there any questions on the proposed travel policy?
Are any of them significant difference from current practice? Significantly?
No, I mean, telephone expenses were some that were reimbursed in the past for staff. But other than the 30 days being defined, there's very little outside of what was the normal practice. It is just really getting it in writing so it can be distributed and there's no questions.
Any other questions about the financial policies? on what Joyce has presented.
David had a question.
Be clear about that.
Okay, clear enough. Okay. I think it's really great when we have financial policies in place, written with expectations, deadlines, it's just, that's cleaned up and sharp. Good.
I think what we're gonna do is see if anybody has any questions about the other one in the interest of time.
That's fine.
Because we published them, and so if you have questions, this would be a good time, and then we need to consider them sort of as a package. Of
Perfect.
Both policies.
I'll entertain a motion to,
You also have any questions?
Kessler so moves.
Kessler and Edwards have made a motion and seconded that we adopt the policies as written in the financial report. All those in favor, please let me know by saying aye, nay, or abstain. Roll call vote. Megan.
Megan Wentz, aye.
Jamie Minor, aye.
Paul Garcia, aye.
David Edwards, aye.
Teresa Hale, aye.
Rosa Gonzalez, aye.
Leslie Kessler, aye.
Stephanie Bernard, aye.
There's a unanimous agreement and motion carries.
The next, this is taxability up. I know that historically, both for staff and board, once a year, I'm not sure really the timeframe, but you got an email from Paula and the link to the catalog of ordering clothing. Kathy and I, when you're on the board, sorry. And that is a taxable event. Any gifts over $25 is a taxable for board and for staff. We are going to adopt that. It was unknown. And so effective July 1st, the practice will still be there that the clothing can be ordered in whatever frequency. But if you so participate, that will be under 1099 as a taxable compensation that you have received. So that is a change to what the board has done in the past. Just trying to get on board with all IRS rules. Okay, the last one is a recommendation. I have been talking to Kathy. As you know, all of the excess over 250 in PNC checking account has been going to Pinnacle because they will truncate and send monies out to different tranches that are protected to the 250. It is a very nice service. However, we're only making 1.8% interest. I have talked to our personal banker there and he's given me every excuse that, there's nothing else that he can do within their realm because of their cost basis. And I have expressed to Kathy that there are opportunities for the money to stay safe, that there would be no loss of funds. I have talked to the PNC, one of the PNC financial advisors, and there are 3 products out there that they have that would fall into our requirements of no risk to the principal amount. And you guys can read this. My recommendation right now is to invest $150,000 in the insurance protected principal. It's a fixed annuity. If we invest at least $100,000, it is 3.2% of interest that compounds annually. So that is, even though 3.2 is not a lot, but it is better than 1.8 that we are getting at Pinnacle. It's a 3-year duration. We have, $2 million sitting right now in Pinnacle. $150,000 held for 3 years. Is it gonna, tax any of our, ability to pay bills? But that is my thought for at least the first 6 months. I'm getting some information, written information. The next tranche, if the board sees fit or is to go into the indexed annuity once the market stabilizes a little bit. He is willing to come in, talk to me and Kathy. My thought is if we do a Zoom meeting with the Finance and Audit Committee, if there is any concern about deviating from the Pinnacle policy that we've been doing. But my recommendation is 150,000 in this fixed annuity rate product they have.
Okay, that does require a vote. I'll accept the motion to do that reinvestment.
Edwards.
So now we'll do a vote. Any questions for Joyce on moving the money so that we can actually get a higher interest rate? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor, please state your name. Aye, nay, or abstain. Megan?
Megan Wentz, aye. Jamie Minor, aye.
Paul Garcia, aye. David Edwards, aye.
Teresa Hale, aye.
Leslie Kensler, aye.
Stephanie Bernard, aye.
And Rosa is absent. So the ayes have it. You can go ahead and move that money and make a full walk at 3.25%. 3.2%.
Okay, I'm done.
Thank you. A wonderful financial report and presentation, Joyce. Thank you so much. Very thankful to have you on this team. Okay, moving along now, Debbie Reagan, are you ready for your report?
Okay, and I'm watching the my report is there for your reading pleasure. It's already been submitted. One thing I'd like to point out is thank you very much for the ability of us to hire an intern for record retention. The goal by the end of the summer is to be caught up with all record retention from a paper standpoint. And that we merge the life of a license. If it had discipline, if it had revivals, and that we merge it into one. So that in mine, you can go to one place, you'll find anything, you will find anything. But if you do, it'll be all over the place. So we really, it's been a long journey and those records, and thank you very much. You can almost see the finish line to get to continuity. Where we continue. So thank you very much for that.
It's just amazing that when you went to the, the previous one, the rate, the amount of books and boxes and file cabinets and everything like that, the current state now.
It's just, my office is now back. They don't let me mess around with any other part of the office.
Yeah. All right, moving on to the position statements. We already talked about the one of the soft tissue mobilization using biofeedback. We merged that into the internal public health position statement. The performance of finger blood specimens, would like to change that to performance of non-physical therapy medical procedures. This would also merge position statement 6 and position statement 12. We get a lot of requests, like right now, they're saying they're short-staffed in some of the skilled nursing facilities, and that the PTs are being asked more and more and more to do CNA type activities that again are not considered physical therapy. So what we are asking is that we wanted to merge, not create a laundry list, but that this would encompass all of
I
that.
think that's great because I think there's going to be more and more issues that come up, and especially with the nursing crisis.
And so this would be the one, we've already made a statement of approving the internal public health, but this would be, I believe, we have to make approve.
Yes. So that this would require a vote. And if you've had a chance to look at it, one of the things that we decided is that people may be out there looking for the thing that's called finger blood specimens. So we're gonna still leave that in the title, but it's gonna be updated.
So then we need to read the other position statements, review them, but did not feel like there were any significant updates that needed to be made with those. And this, we do this typically every couple of years. Now, I think we need a motion to readopt the position statements after review.
That's what I'm saying.
Motion's been made and seconded by Leslie and Stephanie to accept the deputy director's,
Position statement.
position step. Thank you. And all those in favor of the vote, we're going to vote, say aye. Nay, aye, nay, or abstain.
Megan Wentz, aye. Jamie Minor, aye.
Paul Garcia, aye.
David Overside.
Teresa Hale, aye.
Rosa Gonzalez, aye.
Leslie Kessler, aye.
Stephanie Bernard, aye. And the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Debbie. Okay.
Moving on, regulatory flexibility, this has also already been posted for review, just to highlight many of the things that were implemented for regulatory flexibility, such as electronic receipt of license verifications and transcripts will continue. The most significant thing, if the state of emergency is lifted, besides the temporary exemptions, we will go back to 1 year for an online application. That it is good for 1 year. We have refunded some applicants if they really truly were confused and did not apply for the right thing. We will go back and look at that time. Not that significant, but the most significant thing that would change, we're going back to 1 year for the application process and all of its components. All right, the total. We have had, speaking of the foreign educated, they've come out with the total essentials. We have always used the total IBT. Don't ask me what IBT stands for. And the difference in the total IBT and the total essentials is the IBT is 100% academic English. You traditionally had to go to, you still have to go to the Prometric Center. Now, because of COVID, you can be proctored actively in your home. It is a longer test, and again, it is 100% academic English, whereas the total essentials is 50% academic English and 50% general English. We contacted, in addition to speaking to David Gabb, we also contacted Jamie Nolan at the NCPT and asked them what they accepted, and they did not accept the total essentials. They only accept the IBT total. So what is, after consultation with the executive director and David Gadd, we are going to stick with the total IBT. You can take it, the home version, or you can take the one that is Prometric, but we will not accept the total essentials. Of note, you always want someone to pass. We did one of the foreign educated that took the essentials test and then went back and took the total IBT to not pass it. So again, it is more structured test.
The regulation in our board rules. Or whichever one, it's the rules. Okay, so does it specify which total it is?
It does not in the rule, but in the current, it is posted on the website. Yeah, that's the one we use.
I think in a former version of the rules, there was one component that talked about the IBT, but we updated the rules a couple of times, and I don't think it says that, but we didn't even know there was such a thing as the essentials. And someone just sent that as their.
Can they challenge it? If the rule just says total, if they submit it, one, say, well,
That's a very good question.
Say that again.
Can they challenge us?
I mean, I don't see how that can be overturned. I'm not aware of any.
I'm just saying, if they did the essentials, if the rule says just total, it doesn't specify essentials, IBT. in it.
So where would you not lawsuit? I'm just
So
trying to
could they
think.
come back and say, you don't say you have to do the
Right,
IBT?
Yeah, I know it's not specified in there, it's just what we've always done. But I guess they would have to sue us and civil. It would cost.
Okay,
way
it's not
more
rules,
work
yeah.
if you just take the other.
Right. One more point on regulatory flexibility. We know that when the state of emergency ends, the temporary exemptions will also end. So proactively, we compared all of our endorsement applications to the temporary exemption list. And we have reached out to anyone that has started an application, an endorsement application, to see if they are going to, in fact, complete it, or what can we do to help them complete it. We have heard nothing about lifting the state of emergency, but we did not want people to get comfortable because it's been going on so long. So we have cross-referenced those and are actively working with anybody to complete any endorsement application should they have decided that's what they want to do. Update on transcripts. We are so thankful that we now have parchment. It really does improve the quality of the transcript that we receive from the third party. Interesting sideline that has come up, which we are working with, is it sends automatic notifications that we have received it and then we processed it, meaning that we moved it. So the student knows exactly where in the process their transcript is. And now we started seeing an increase in the emails going, well, I see that it was processed at 8 o'clock this morning, it's now 12. It's not on my status page. So we are crafting now a notification to go on the status page that gives reasonable expectations for when you expect to see a document process. Also, we have had virtually no negative feedback from the character reference upload, where the applicant sends someone the link and they go to the website and they complete it. That also is going, I had it, they finished it this morning and it's not on my status page this afternoon. So again, we're going to put a clarification that, you know, it is due diligence that this document needs to be processed and evaluated, and a reasonable time frame that they can expect it to be posted on their application status page. One of the licensing team application questions, we've got a couple, and what we have learned, thank you for all of Kathy's role modeling, is that, you know, anytime we want to make changes to the applications or processes, it's the board rules, it's not our rules. It might be a policy, but again, we've got to first be sure have we complied with the the Practice Act and the board rules. We'd like to bring your attention to on initial applications, exam, endorsement, or initial applications, exam endorsement, and revivals. With some of the revivals, we have asked for work history, and endorsement, we ask for work history. That sometimes is a major hold up with an application process. And so what we're bringing forth today is, does the board think that that is a determining factor in the decision to license somebody in North Carolina? Or do we really need a full work history from someone who is coming to us by endorsement from another state?
I want to add some additional information. So my understanding is that your job is to determine whether someone is competent to practice and they have a good moral character to be licensed. And those two things are covered by their character references, their FBI criminal background check in terms of the moral character issue, and whether they've answered the questions on the application that are consistent with what is on their background check. From a competence perspective, you're looking to determine, did they actually graduate and can they pass the exam? Now, from a revival applicant, you have that. I know that back in the day, there was a listing on there of where you working. And I really have absolutely no idea how they ever did anything with that. It was just there. And maybe on an initial application, you're not going to have a professional work history because they haven't worked as a licensee anywhere. So that's kind of moot. You're not making a judgment based on anything. Can you really make a judgment based on a resume, if you will, the fact that they have it and that they had a work history in physical therapy? Does that tell you anything about their competence? And I kind of maintain maybe not. Right now, we are not an employer, we are not looking at, did you have breaks in your work history? We don't have the right to ask them, why did you have a break in your work history? You know, lots of stuff happens nowadays. And not everybody stays in the field all the time. People are in and out. The world is different. I don't know that I see the necessity of that. And as Debbie's mentioning, if that's kind of a hold up in the process to processing an application, now you all may feel differently when you're looking at things on the applications. You may look at them differently than I am. So you may have a reason that you would want that to be on there. And so we wanted the board to make the call. Do you need that to be able to make a determination about competence? And met the educational requirement and ethical competence.
Well, how long of work history do they have to provide? Like for the application, like is it just, how many years back do they have to go and provide their work experience?
Yes, for all of it.
All of it? I mean, I can see like in the past, like 1 to 2 years, you can maybe.
No, I just read one on a person 20 years out and it was very
Oh my
long.
goodness, yeah.
Well, what's the
I think that's-
rationale for that though?
Yeah,
Okay, great. So if you want a full one, great, that's good. Or if you want 1 year, what are you doing with that information to actually contribute to your decision on whether you're going to approve that application or not? That's really my question.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Other than that.
I can only think of a time that where their previous work history has been important to me, and that's when especially they're like foreign trained, or there's some kind of gap or something like that. And so if they're foreign trained and they've been in the country practicing for 10 years, I'm like, oh, they're pretty good to go, versus somebody who's has been licensed but not working in the States.
and one of the things that I feel like about that is that's where I think early on, I felt like I was inconsistent. You know, if we're talking about we want to be consistent and transparent, I can't remember who had this much experience and what we said at that time. We haven't built that into our rules or our decision-making process, so we can be consistent about it. So that's what worries me, is that we're not being consistent. So who are we just, discriminating against that because we didn't do it consistently?
That's the only time I can remember that I've really looked at it other than out of sort of curiosity.
Yeah,
Right.
Thinking, wow, they move around a lot or whatever.
Where they were.
Because we look at whether their license has been continuous, if they continually have a license. So that'll tell you at least if they're continuing ed and all of that is gonna be, as opposed to having to see their work history.
If a state has.
Isn't there another way to find out how long they've had their license active versus?
Well, it comes back on the NCPT one.
That's for initial applicants. So you probably don't see that for endorsements.
No, I
or
thought we do. It'll
somebody
tell
who
me how many
agrees.
license,
What
if it's
states
expired,
and-
when it
yeah.
expired, so it tells me that they've had a license in these states.
I agree, it doesn't give you any idea about their competency.
Yeah.
And it's usually, we have also on the application, where do you expect to work? And that's blank probably 90% of the time. And, so we don't make a decision based on that information either.
I look at the key factors, not made, client set, board history, but it's not a factor for me.
So do we need an agreement to not require the work history?
Are you asking for that?
I think you need to make a motion so that we, as the staff, know how to proceed.
Well, and before we do that, should we also take off the where do you plan to work, because it's really rarely answered. And so I motion that we remove the work history and the work plan parts.
The second part?
Okay, motion's been made and seconded for the discussion, Leslie.
I'm sorry, I just said, are there other things we need to look at the whole application, or is everything else that's on there for five rule?
What can you, for the initial applications, I think that answers the major questions that we have right now. The next topic I'm talking about is five. So, but for the.
I think your answer is yes.
Okay.
Everything
And then
else.
we talked about in the past some about those, what is it, vague questions? Yes, that question.
Yes.
that we talked sometime about perhaps clarifying some of those or some of it.
Yeah,
And
no.
I was just gonna say, would it be appropriate to have y'all review the whole thing and make recommendations for revised applications?
At this point in time, I think we're comfortable with
I
other
think we are.
information that we're gathering. This is what stands out.
To your point, Leslie, though, which I will say, we learned through the process of doing that imaging statute proposal for the attorney at the legislature, that by asking for an attestation on the application, we can also gather information. And we may choose to add some additional questions to get additional information, such as, do you meet the requirement for advanced training for dry needling? And so, but we aren't at that point to be able to make that recommendation.
Thank you for indulging.
So right now, we have a motion on the table. Is there any further discussion about removing work history and intended work setting on the application for endorsement? Hearing none, please state your name, aye, nay, or abstain, beginning with Megan.
Megan Lentz, aye.
Jamie Minor, aye.
Paul Woodson, aye.
David Everside.
Teresa Hale, aye.
Rosa Gonzalez, aye.
Leslie Kessler, aye.
Stephanie Bernard, aye.
The motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Debbie. And next.
One more topic. Bring up the revivals. When we are looking at board rules, we have 5 different categories of revivals. And as we're looking at taking this online, we realized they were not consistent in what we asked for. This is what we want to have happen. Right below are some inconsistencies, such as payment and continuing competence don't have to have character references. Endorsement has to have a notary, but the other payment and continuing competence don't have to have that. Some have to be signed by me, some have to be signed by Kathy, some have to be signed by both of us. So the thought is, why wouldn't we be consistent and as consistent as possible with our other licensing applications? So what we're proposing is that we move the applications online as soon as we're developing it. The $150 fee is already online, that they all have to provide a photo. None of them have to provide a photo now, but that's reasonable, because also it online. And that they all do an affidavit. We don't have to have the notary, because the initial applications, we asked for the attestation, then we would ask for an attestation throughout all of the other, the 5 revivals. If we would have character references, because we've got to be sure they still have good moral character, so that we would ask for all of them to provide character references, that both the executive director and deputy director would review these, and that they all would take the jurisprudence exercise 1. In the past, that was required by the endorsements, but not the others. So we think that you need to go back and see what the current practice act and board's rule and position statements are. So we want to make that required. Again, we just decided that we would not need the work history. We are still not collecting a FBI from a background check on the revivals at this point in time. That's not one of the things we're asking for yet. And that the revivals would be evaluated for appropriateness, completeness of the application by board staff and the license, and signed off by the executive director and the deputy director, and reviewed by the licensing staff. So this would make them essentially all consistent with the same information that we use to judge competency and moral character for initial license applications.
Recommendation to the board.
The recommendation is that the board approve the proposed internal policy changes.
Kessler, so moved. I move this. Bernard second. And Kessler and Bernard have made the motion and second to accept the deputy director's proposed internal policy changes. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll put it to the vote. Please state your name. Aye, nay, or abstain, beginning with Megan.
Megan Lentz, aye.
Jamie Minor, aye.
Paul Garcia. David Edwards, aye.
Teresa Hale, aye.
Rosa Gonzalez, aye.
Just like yes, all right.
Stephanie Bernard, aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Debbie. So nice to get things all in order, isn't it? Is there anything else from the deputy director's report? Thank you. We'll move on to agenda letter number L. Board rules, Debbie.
Oh. That's a big one, don't you forget. Okay, today, we need, this is the big part. What we need to do today is we need to make a motion to adopt the proposed rules, and then they will then go within the next week, be submitted to the Rules Review Commission, and we will attend their meeting in July. And if they are approved, which we have no reason to expect that they're not, they would go into effect in August. So what we need for the board to do today, and
David, can you pull up the one that says vote to adopt those, please?
I mean, you accept proposed rules.
Edwards, aye.
The motion, sorry, David.
Here it is, the motion.
The motion has been made and seconded. You have in front of you all the different rules that have been adopted, proposed. This has been an ongoing, how long? The Rules Review Committee has been working on this for how long?
Each rule cycle takes about 10 months.
Right. So we have all read these into the record. We've reviewed these before. You have them in the depth of your folder. Officially, I have to read this out as the motion that Leslie just proposed. North Carolina Board of PT Examiners moves to adopt the proposed permanent rules cited as, you see in front of you, 21 NCAC 48B 0102, 48F 0101, 48G 0105, 48G 0203, 48G 0504. And we're going to repeal these two rules, 48B 0104 and 48F 0103. Let's make permanent, make the rules consistent with current practice and policy of the NC Board. PTE motion made by Ketzler, seconded by Bernard.
Thank you for reading. So something for that I was.
The motion passed unanimously.
We will be starting another cycle of proposed rules, and one of them that we have already been working on is the informed consent. And we will be having a rules subcommittee meeting to look at the rules again to see what others have come up that may need to be adjusted, revised. So the next cycle generally starts, what we found in the last couple of years is that we start a cycle around September. Is to coincide with the board meetings and our ability to do the public hearings and comment periods.
I have a question. Is that where we would do the, talking about the continued. Oh my gosh. We're going to go for extra competence or advanced. Yes. Advanced training, is that when we would do that or not?
I don't know. It depends on whether the Public Protection Task Force is ready to do something like that. It's possible we could do some rules related.
That's
to
what we
that.
were trying to do though, right? I think that our rule was an advanced training.
It can be a position paper, it can be a policy. It doesn't necessarily have to be a rule.
Gotcha, okay.
I think when you want to get very specific about a particular technique that needs to require a rule that said you'll do X, Y, and Z, it's considered appropriate to do that particular technique. That's where we.
Gotcha.
Did you want to talk about informed consent? Debbie?
That's the informed consent is a proposed rule that we would then add to the next rule cycle.
Yeah.
It's not part of the one we're finishing up now. Right. And originally, when we were still working on imaging, that may or may not have come into play into this, but again, we will begin the next one.
Is there anything else you'd like to discuss on your? The next is letter M, board technology, IT team update.
You have Greg's written report in front of you, and what I will just summarize this by saying, significant, life-changing event. The entire office went to Office 365. I mean, this is life-changing. So, you know, I can't say that enough. They did a great job. It was climbing the Himalayas without oxygen for a period of time in the lead up to it. And David and Greg persisted and persisted and persisted and got it done. So congratulations to the team for that. There are a whole lot of exciting things that they're doing. The other thing I want to mention is that the NCPT API, for which you all applied for and received grant money. Phase 1, I believe, went live, and it will go live at the end of this week, which means phase 1 of it is the scores, after the scores are completed at FSPT, it automatically comes down through, I'm going to call it this portal, because that's about the best understanding I have of it, directly into our system. So we're not waiting for reports anymore. They sit down at their desk and start going. And so that speeds that process up. There are some other processes that SUBA is continuing to program. The thing that we're calling shopping cart, which is otherwise known as the payment screen, all payments will be done online. So when Joyce is saying we're not going to collect checks anymore, it's because everything will be able to be paid for online with a credit card. So all of the goals that we put in front of ourselves starting December of last year are being met on time. And I think IT department gets the look.
Any question about board technology and the accomplishments of our IT team? Hearing none, we'll move on to letter N, correspondence with the schools. You have all the pass rates in front of you. Are there any specific items you want to mention about that?
I have no recommendations about these. You know, I am noticing a slight change in the first time pass rate of the PT schools. You know, when you open up the 1 through 2022, I mean, it's not all schools have had people taking the test, so you can't compare it completely to a prior year. But you know, there's a slight downward trend in that first time pass rate. Now, what is responsible for that? I don't know that we can say, but early testing may have something to do with it. And so, you know, maybe early testing, maybe just anxiety, harder test taking, harder test. I don't know. But that's really, I don't really have any recommendations about communicating with schools regarding that. You all have all of these things that we provide every time, the addresses, the exam schedule, so that you kind of know when you need to be available for application approvals. Debbie has had ongoing communications with the schools regarding AAP, submission of transcripts instead of that form anymore. She went and taught at High Point and basically was complimented highly for her and the staff related to application processing. And that's a good thing. I think we're in a really good spot.
Okay. Let's move on to parametric.
Similarly, related to the parametric report, I don't really have any different like recommendations per se. I think that the satisfaction with the board specifically in terms of application processing, the satisfied, very satisfied is higher than maybe it was previously. I still don't know that we can really take this to heart as telling us specifically about our board. They're still giving these things, this satisfaction score to someone immediately after they've taken a 5-hour test, and they're not thinking about when they were having their application questions answered in the process, most likely. It's a measurement, and so we take that into account, and I feel like some of the other feedback that we're getting directly from schools and such is a little bit more.
I don't think I would, well, one is after you are breaking after the test, but yeah, I don't know that I would distinguish between the jurisdiction and the pro-metric and FSBPT and my school and all that kind of stuff. It always like, some magical process, is this, to be able to point out and say, this part's really good and this part is not. I don't know, that's even realistic.
That's right. So that's where I've really gotten to the point where they provide this information to us, and therefore I provide it to you. I haven't always found the exact relevance or what we could point to say, well, that's the issue, and we need to do something maybe differently if it's not 100% satisfaction. We're the ethics, the top two, of course, are things that you hear me say every time. This is exactly where you can come when you need to take your ethics training. Go to this link right here at the top, and you go, and it points you right to the ethics education. I will say, pleasantly surprising, that I had to retake mine, which is due every 2 years. They have streamlined it. It doesn't take 3 hours
Oh, thank
anymore.
heaven.
It's so much better. So much better. I think that there are a couple people who are in need of taking an ethics education course. So we're going to look at the compliance report, and the next people up for grabs would be Ms. Stephanie Bernard. She's due July 1st. And Rosa's due in October. So yeah, so I think you'll be happy that it's a little more streamlined than it was previously to take the online version. And I know David Edwards sometimes takes the live in person one.
The video online.
Pardon?
That, the first one was live stream. But the new one online, Snap.
Yeah.
It's really easy, really easy.
It's definitely better than it was previously. Yeah, no. Okay, so licensure compact. Again, this is just reporting out to you that we remain in compliance with the requirements of the compact statute. The other thing is that, we want to be able to demonstrate that we are doing our part to provide licensees and the general public with information about the PT compact. I think what I would like to recommend is one of the things we need to do is maybe update the section on our website about the PT compact and provide some information that was sent to us recently. And then in terms of the newsletter, we were providing some articles that we can put out there. And I want to request that if you have a brainstorm about anything else we can do to help people understand that they can get a compact privilege, maybe in place of a license, if that was the right thing for them, if you've got ideas about ways to get out that message, I'm glad to take them in and try to implement that. And the annual meeting for the PT compact is in October in California.
That's part of the FSBPT.
It will be, immediately afterwards, the next morning. So we are very, very fortunate to be allowed to ride their coattails because they already have a facility, and so they help absorb the cost for that. The compact commission is not independently self-sustaining financially yet, and so really, I think the FSBPT and the PT compact are kind of tied together in that way, and we are benefiting from that level of organization that they have, and we'll continue to experience that for a while. Governor's appointments. This is again FYI. Dr. Garcia's term will be ending this year, as well as Jenny Minor's. and Rosa Gonzalez, but both Rosa and Jamie are eligible for reappointment, whereas Dr. Garcia has served 2 terms. So I don't know, but you serve until there's an appointment. So all of you, depending on what happens.
And I appreciate anybody who sent that form in. The online thing seems easy, but when you gave people a paper, I would ask them to give it back and I would submit it, then I would know how many I had
I see.
and how many people did it. So it's kind of like, you feel like, well, I don't know if enough people actually took the few minutes.
Right. I will tell you this time, we did post a link to APTA-NC's link so that everybody could get it from the website. Yes, because
And
it was
yeah.
not there before or last year. And I think that was a nice improvement, you know, now that this is like their 3rd time doing this, you know, we can add improvements each time and that was very helpful. And so that is open until June 10th, 2 more days. So anybody that wants to nominate, 2 more days. And Rosa's is through the boards and commissions. The governor does it through boards and commissions. So slightly different process.
Can I ask, how do you find another position? Because Dr. Garcia can't reapply. So how do you have to actually seek?
It's nominations. Yes, through nominations.
Okay, I mean, do you have, I guess, you don't wait to just see if somebody put their name in.
Well, so let me just say this, as far as board staff goes, we cannot be accused of being in the middle of that
I see.
process. So we stay out of it.
Okay, that's fine.
And so, you know, there are people that are very aware that there needs to be a nomination, and it's possible that, you know, I've heard things that there may be people that are being sought out
Okay,
for it, but maybe we'll get lucky.
nice.
So again, reports to the state. I provide this list for you, number 1, so that you're aware that your staff is compliant with the requirements of the law. 2, so that you can see the kinds of things that we submit on a quarterly basis, and that this does take up a fair amount of time. And for accuracy's sake, you know, I want you to be able to have access to these reports so that you can look at them and ask questions. These reports that we've done this particular quarter are all reports that have been done before. And so I think we're the only one where we made some updates were to NC Bold, where I learned some information about that. And we added the temporary exemptions. And so that's also on their website, which hadn't been before, and same with the compact privileges. So that was good education for us as a board that, you know, they're also, the Department of Commerce is also responsible for housing like a careers website. And so they post this information so they can help people who want to get into certain professions. Anybody have any questions about the kinds of things that we're submitting, what we're doing? Okay. We need an appointment by the board chair of Jamie Minor, officially to Public Protection Task Force.
Board chair selects Jamie Minor to be a member on the
Public Protection.
Public Protection Task Force.
Yes. Great, thank you. And then we're at this. Yes, so most importantly today, I think we need to make a decision. The board needs to make a decision about whether to fund all of the board members that would like to attend. And Joyce has left, but we have planned for that to happen. Now, but through the budgeting process, what I will say is, we did not plan knowing that this much inflation was going to happen. So it's still up to the board to make that determination. We've talked about this before, that a prior board made the decision that this is the one big regulatory meeting that we can go to. It moves around the country on purpose and in fairness to different regions. It will be in the East Coast sometimes west, sometimes north or south or middle. And so but you will need to make the decision. 3 people are already funded. That would be Rosa, Jamie, and myself. And so then the other members that may want to go, the board will need to do the funding for that. So, first of all, could I just understand how many people want to and are able to go? If you just put the name out. So 1, 2, no, David, if you remember me, doesn't even no. Oh, you're already going. I'm sorry. So it's really 3 additional people. So I think what we would like to make a motion about and memorialize is that we would like to fund the additional board members who are able to attend to go.
I feel like that the last 2 years of no in-person national meetings have been a real sad occasion to me. Particularly the Leadership Issues Forum, which is such a dynamic opportunity to share issues in our jurisdiction with members of other jurisdictions. And as well as the upcoming board training for new board members that's going to be all virtual. That just makes me sad because there is so much interactive discussion that can happen, so much learning and enthusiasm that you can find out from talking to somebody from South Dakota and Water Fountain. So I would support anybody to go that can go. We certainly have the finances to send people, and I just think it's such a meaningful experience. I want to speak in favor of that. I'm not speaking in favor of suing myself. It's kind of odd, but anyway, I think there's so much that you can gain as a board member by having this experience.
I just yet the other one would have not been canceled. And I would have been like, I went to one, I feel good about going to that one, but because that one was canceled, I was kind of like, but I feel like it would be a good experience.
Yes, absolutely. And it's probably the most expensive plane fare that we'll be paying for to get us out there because of the airfares have really skyrocketed. So I speak in favor.
I speak in favor as well. It was a great experience for me. And you meet a lot of interesting people. You learn a lot. So I think it's wonderful.
You know, I make a motion. You know, I'm speaking against sending 3 additional board members to this meeting.
Make a motion that we send 3 additional board members to the meeting.
I second that. Okay, the motion's been made by Jamie Minor, seconded by Megan Wentz, that we, the board fund 3 additional board members to attend the meeting in addition to the existing 3 that will be funded as delegate, assistant delegate, and executive director. All those in favor, please let it be known through your roll call vote. Nay, aye, nay, or abstain. Beginning with Megan Wentz.
Megan Wentz, aye. Jamie Minor, aye.
All votes aye.
David Edwards, aye.
Teresa Hale, aye.
Crystal Gonzalez, aye.
Leslie Fisher, aye.
Stephanie Bernard, aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for that.
Kathy, for that, I put the virtual delegate assembly, which I need to be at, right? On my calendar, is that 7 our time?
That's a great question. There should be more that comes out about that.
California is 3 and sometimes 2 hours.
It's before the meeting ever begins. They're doing they want all the candidates.
I think it is 7 hour time. I need to double check, but I'm
Okay.
almost 100% sure.
I've marked it on my calendar.
It's right after the meeting.
Yeah, so Rosa, well, it's the 24th,
It's before the.
which is before the meeting.
Before the meeting. Yeah.
So Rosa and Jamie need to go, so that if one of you is the backup, so both of you know exactly what to do.
And what about if Holly could grab one of us and make us artists?
Oh, wow, well, if you get out there and you're ready to quit your day job, Go right on. After we. So it's, yeah. Well, we'll save your return airfare then. And this last thing, I don't know a lot about, but in their last newsletter, they advertised a new member portal. So stay tuned for that. There may be more information that you can get access to more easily. I don't know much about that at this point. APTA, most of these are announcements, but importantly, the first item talks about the APTA NC meeting being October 14th, 15th of 2022. Typically, I go and I'm there to represent the board and provide the board report. I don't think I'm going to be able to attend this year, and so I wanted to know if anybody would like to go and be the board representative.
I wouldn't mind going.
Anybody else? Arm wrestling, no? Okay, Jenny?
Go with JD or?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's in High Point. So we'll make sure you get, we know more about when I don't think they've come out with the agenda yet, about when the business meeting is, for sure.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry, back on the annual meeting here in California in
Yes.
October. Are they doing the virtual delegate assembly prior to the meeting because why?
Well,
Are
I
they
believe,
suspicious they might have to go virtual with the whole meeting? Or are they just doing it at the same time?
well, I think it's for multiple reasons. Not everybody is statewide is still traveling. And so every state that's still a member gets to vote. And I would bet that, I don't know this, that the vote may end up being a virtual vote. I think so because of that, everybody needs to already know who the candidates are and about the candidates and hear what the candidates have to say. Yeah, and it's the delegate assembly. I'm sorry, I'm misspeaking. Yes, the whole delegate assembly part that we go to at the very, very end, that's virtual. They voted to do that last year. It is virtual now. You're not sitting in the room like we've done before. And that is really the time saver. Yes, is what that's really about. Some of these other resources for APTA are listed below. Some of the, David, I don't know if you want to speak to this motion, RC10, that was about the maternal health that you sent to me. Okay, all right. There's just some interesting things that are going before the House of Delegates, and it's always good for us to know what kinds of things APTA is voting or has policies about. And I would say that here we got an education, certainly from the Public Health Academy, about the types of things that are being evolving in practice. So I think that understanding House of Delegates items are important. Last couple of things, we don't really have any new updates from CLEAR or FCCPT, and I just posted a few articles that I got, or articles / questions that we received, scope of practice questions that I thought were interesting. Medicaid is gonna, if you want to be credentialed at Medicaid, they're looking at the owner and the manager of the clinic as well, and that that happened previously. FSBPT has come out.
Kathy,
Yes.
excuse me. I couldn't read that one because it was upside down.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Would you just tell me what they were looking at?
As far as the RC10.
Medicare, what they were looking at.
Well, all I know is that, when you have to be made eligible to receive payment from them, if you're a provider. And so they're also going to look at who's owning the clinics. And
Not
who's
just
owning
the PTs work.
Right,
Okay,
right.
thank you.
Right, I'm sorry, I was looking at that. I think there's a feature in Adobe where you can rotate it. And I'll have to, I know.
I
didn't
probably
see
could
that.
have put it like this.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. The treatment of self, family, and other close relations. It's funny, right after this came out, I got this question from a licensee. And I said, you know, we do not have a rule that makes it a violation for you to treat a close family member or relation. But, you know, if you read this, it gives some interesting points about that. And maybe other states have adopted positions on this, but we have not done so. And I thought that was interesting. If anybody would like to discuss that at some future point, we certainly do that.
Just, I noticed on there, it says, professional, a dual relationship, professional colleague or employee. I was talking to a colleague in an organization, and they had a case where a therapist was practicing a technique on another coworker, and I might even been pneumothorax. Anyway, they had a bad outcome and ended up having to go through the, have a follow-up, medical interventions, or an X-ray or something like that. And it was, they were having a big debate on whether it was workers' comp or not. It was going to cover this, all these assessment, these diagnostic things, because they were practicing a technique. Was it required for work? Was it not? Was it free treatment and all this kind of stuff like that? And so they're debating, because the reason they called me to ask me if I had a policy that said you can't treat. That's what that's part of how we determine competencies on each other. So we practice do things on each other to say that we're competent to do them on a patient, kind of stuff. So anyway, but it was a really interesting scenario. Unfortunately, I don't know what the final outcome of that, what they made that rule and what that rule was.
It's very interesting lessons to be learned, but
And here's a good point about that. We allow our therapists to treat each other and staff people, but on invasive treatments like dry needling, they still need to take a history. They still need to have informed consent. All that has to be in place, because you just can't dry needle in everybody without knowing what their medical history is and without having that informed consent, which also protects the clinic and the therapist from litigation, hopefully on some level.
If you can only treat that way, you have to make a record.
Right, that's right. Now, if you want to do a trigger point massage or a stretch or show them something, that's fine, I don't care. But invasive, you gotta do it right.
well, I thought this was really interesting, and we haven't had any complaints related to this type of thing per se, but this may come back around somewhere. Does anybody have any questions about any of these other questions that have come to the board that we've answered? Future meetings, opens.
Our next meeting is already scheduled.
Yes.
For September the 14th, here in person.
Yes. That will be in the minutes if you want to do that. It's also posted on the website, on the board calendar, so you need to put those on your.
And the next meeting after that will be December the 7th.
And I believe, because we originally thought we were going to have to meet at a hotel because we couldn't adequately do the technology portion of our meeting from here, we may end up having to have that at Crabtree Marriott. So it'll be Christmas time, and we'll probably end up doing the rooms there too. So we'll do the rooms there, and that's where I wanted to make it. Well, they changed the wiring in here so that we could stream it, and it had not been done, so we didn't know that we were going to be able to do this, and so we had already scheduled it for a hotel, and we couldn't get out of that. And so it's not very expensive. Isn't it like $500 to do the room and the food? So
They
I
waive
mean,
the rent. It's just that they waive the rent
They moved the room cost, so we just moved the back up there, so it's for one meeting. We'll be in a different. That's December. So that's all I have. All right, is there any other question coming before the executive director or the chair at this meeting? No questions. It is now 3:22 and our meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for your time today and effort, being on time.